The people we respect most aren't the loudest in the room. They don't rush to prove themselves. They don't over-explain. They don't react to every provocation. They pause. That pause is not weakness, it's power. When something unexpected happens, an insult, a challenge, a disagreement, most people react immediately. Emotion takes the wheel, words spill out, and respect quietly slips away. But respected people do something different. They create space between what happens to them and how they respond because of it. That space is the skill. In that space, they choose their words. They choose their tone. They choose their energy. And here's the paradox. The less desperate you are to be heard, the more people listen. Think about leaders you admire. They don't rush, they don't panic, they don't defend their ego at every turn. Their calm sends a message. I'm grounded. I'm clear. I don't need approval to lead. Respect follows clarity, and clarity comes from self-control. This skill shows up everywhere, in meetings, when you listen fully before speaking, in conflict, when you don't escalate, in decisions, when you stay aligned with your values. People may not consciously notice it, but they feel it. And feeling safe, steady, and certain around someone is the foundation of respect. So if you want instant respect, don't try to impress, don't dominate, don't overtalk, slow down, respond with intention, let your presence speak before your words. Because the most respected people in the room aren't fighting to be seen, they've mastered themselves first. And that is the subtle skill that changes everything. Respect doesn't begin when you speak louder. It doesn't begin when you prove how smart you are. It doesn't begin when you dominate a conversation or overwhelm people with information. Respect begins much earlier than most people realize. It begins before you finish your first sentence, sometimes before you even say a word. In those first few seconds, something quiet but powerful happens. People aren't listening to your ideas yet. They aren't judging your intelligence or your experience. They are deciding something far more fundamental. Is this person worth my attention? And that decision, once made, is incredibly difficult to reverse. Human beings are wired to make fast judgments, not because we are shallow, but because our brains are designed to protect our time, energy, and focus. Every day we are surrounded by noise, opinions, demands, interruptions, and information competing for our attention. So when someone steps into our space, physically or verbally, our mind quickly scans for signals. Is this person calm or chaotic? Are they grounded or reactive? Are they seeking approval or offering clarity? Before logic has a chance to speak, instinct takes over. And instinct is what decides respect. This is why so many people feel invisible despite having valuable ideas. They wait for the right moment to speak, they prepare the perfect argument, they rehearse the smartest points in their head. But when the moment arrives, the room has already made up its mind, not because the ideas weren't good, but because the signal sent in those opening seconds didn't inspire trust or authority. Respect doesn't respond to information first, it responds to presence. Presence is not about confidence in the loud, performative sense. It's not about filling silence or proving competence. Presence is the quiet assurance that you belong in the moment without needing validation from it. People sense this immediately. They sense whether you are trying to take something from the interaction, approval, attention, control, or whether you are there to contribute something grounded and intentional. The former creates tension. The latter creates respect. Think about how quickly you form impressions of others. You don't wait for their full explanation. You don't analyze their resume in your head. You notice how they enter a room, how they carry themselves, how they pause before speaking. You notice whether they rush, whether they fidget, whether they over-explain. None of this is conscious, yet all of it shapes how much weight their words will carry. And the same is happening to you every time you speak. What's uncomfortable is that respect is often decided before effort has a chance to matter. You can be right and still be ignored. You can be prepared and still be dismissed. Because respect isn't granted to those who try hardest. It's granted to those who appear most centered. The irony is that the more you try to earn respect, the more you signal that you don't already have it. And people feel that instantly. In those first few seconds, people are not asking, is this person intelligent? They are asking, is this person stable? Are they clear? Are they safe to follow? Stability is magnetic, clarity is calming, and calm is persuasive. When someone speaks from a place of calm, it tells the room that they are not threatened by disagreement, not desperate for approval, and not driven by ego. That message alone earns attention long before words do. This is why volume doesn't equal authority. Speaking louder often reveals inner noise. Talking faster often reveals anxiety. Overloading people with facts often reveals insecurity. None of these are flaws of character, but they're signals. And signals matter more than statements. You don't convince people to respect you by explaining why you deserve it. You let them feel it by how you show up. There is a reason why some people can say very little and still command the room. It's not mystery or charisma, it's alignment. What they feel inside matches what they project outside. There is no rush, no tension, no internal debate leaking into their behavior. That alignment communicates confidence without arrogance and authority without aggression. People lean in because they sense coherence. In contrast, when someone begins speaking while mentally seeking approval, their words carry less weight. Even strong ideas sound uncertain when delivered from a place of need. The audience feels the gap between the message and the messenger. And once that gap is felt, respect erodes quietly. No argument can fix it. No explanation can repair it. because the decision has already been made on a level deeper than words. This is why the moment respect is decided is so subtle that most people miss it entirely. They focus on content, not context. They polish the message but ignore the mindset behind it. Yet mindset is the first thing people perceive. Before your words land, your energy arrives. Before your ideas are evaluated, your presence is judged. And once that judgment is made, everything else is filtered through it. What makes this moment so powerful is that it's completely within your control. Not by manipulating others, but by mastering yourself. You don't need to become louder, smarter, or more impressive. You need to become more intentional, to slow down, to enter conversations without needing to prove anything, to trust that your value doesn't depend on immediate validation. That internal shift changes everything externally. When you understand this, conversations stop feeling like performances. You stop trying to win people over and start showing up grounded. And when you do that, people feel it. They listen differently. They respond differently. They treat your words with more weight, not because you demanded it, but because your presence invited it. The moment respect is decided is not dramatic. There's no announcement, no signal light. It happens quietly in a pause, in a breath, in the way you begin. And once you become aware of that moment, you realize that respect has never been about saying the right thing at the right time. It has always been about being the right version of yourself before the first sentence is even finished. We all know people who are intelligent, skilled, even successful, yet they struggle to earn respect. They have the degrees, the experience, the results to prove they're capable. On paper, they should be listened to. In meetings, they should be influential. In conversations, their words should carry weight. And yet they're often interrupted, overlooked, or quietly ignored. Not because they lack ability, but because ability alone doesn't automatically translate into respect. Talent can open doors, but it doesn't decide who people follow once they're inside the room. At the same time, we've all encountered the opposite. Someone who doesn't speak much. Someone who doesn't advertise their achievements or dominate discussions. Someone who isn't trying to impress anyone. And still, when they finally speak, the room shifts. Conversations slow down, people pay attention, their words seem to land with more gravity. This contrast confuses a lot of people because it challenges a deeply held belief that if you work hard enough, learn enough, and become good enough, respect will naturally follow. But real life keeps proving that belief wrong. This isn't luck, it's not charisma in the theatrical sense, and it's definitely not confidence as most people understand it, because confidence, when misunderstood, often turns into performance. It becomes something you display rather than something you embody. People try to look confident by talking more, asserting themselves harder, or projecting certainty even when they feel unsure inside. But respect doesn't respond well to performance. It responds to authenticity and restraint. And that's where talent alone falls short. Talent is visible. Skill can be demonstrated. Success can be measured. Respect, however, is felt. It's an emotional and psychological response, not a logical one. People don't respect you because of what you know. They respect you because of how you make them feel in your presence. Do they feel rushed or calm? Do they feel talked at or understood? Do they feel tension or trust? These feelings are formed long before talent has a chance to show itself. One of the biggest mistakes talented people make is assuming their ability should speak for itself. When it doesn't, frustration builds. They push harder. They explain more. They try to prove their value through effort and output. Ironically, this often weakens their presence. The more someone tries to convince others of their worth, the more they signal that their worth is uncertain. And people pick up on that immediately. Meanwhile, those who command respect without trying have learned something subtle but powerful. They understand that restraint communicates confidence more clearly than force. They know when not to speak. They are comfortable with silence. They don't rush to fill gaps or defend themselves at every opportunity. This doesn't mean they lack ideas. It means they trust their ideas enough to let them arrive at the right moment. Respect grows in environments where there is emotional stability. People gravitate toward those who feel steady, especially in uncertain situations. Talent can solve problems, but steadiness makes others feel safe following your lead. When someone stays composed under pressure, doesn't react emotionally to disagreement, and doesn't need to win every exchange, they signal maturity. And maturity is deeply respected. This is why talent often plateaus without the subtle skill. You can only go so far being the smartest person in the room. Eventually, influence matters more than intelligence. Leadership matters more than expertise. And leadership is not about having all the answers, it's about creating trust. Trust grows when people believe you're grounded, not reactive. Clear, not defensive. Present, not performative. Many talented people unknowingly undermine themselves by overusing their strengths. They correct others too quickly. They interrupt to add value. They jump in to show they know the answer. Each action may be well-intentioned, but together they create an impression of restlessness. And restlessness doesn't inspire confidence. Calm does. Those who command the room understand timing. They listen fully before speaking. They observe dynamics instead of competing with them. They don't need to dominate to be relevant. When they do speak, it's measured, it's intentional. And because they haven't exhausted the room with noise, their words stand out. Not because they're louder, but because they're rarer. Once you recognize this, you start seeing it everywhere. In workplaces, in families, in social settings, the most respected person is often not the most talented one. but the most centered one, the one who doesn't chase attention yet somehow attracts it, the one who isn't threatened by other people's competence, the one who doesn't confuse urgency with importance. Talent gets noticed. Skill gets acknowledged. But respect is earned through consistency of presence. It's built moment by moment through how you respond, not just what you produce. When you stop relying solely on what you can do and start paying attention to how you show up, something shifts. People begin to listen differently. Not because you demanded it, but because you've learned the quiet discipline that makes respect feel natural, not forced. That subtle skill changes the way your talent is received. Without it, your abilities remain underutilized. With it, even simple words carry influence. And once you see the difference, you realize that talent was never the missing piece. It was only waiting for the right presence to give it power. Every interaction sends a signal, whether you intend it to or not. Long before people analyze your words, they feel your presence. Your tone carries emotion before meaning. Your timing reveals your internal state. Your reactions expose what you're really led by. You may think you're communicating ideas, but what you're truly transmitting is alignment or uncertainty, calm or tension, clarity or insecurity. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people are broadcasting insecurity without realizing it. Insecurity doesn't always look like fear. Often it disguises itself as overconfidence, urgency, or constant explanation. It shows up when someone speaks too fast, interrupts too quickly, or over-justifies every point. It appears when reactions are immediate instead of considered, when disagreement feels like a threat rather than a perspective. These behaviors are rarely intentional. They come from a desire to be understood, respected, or valued. But intention doesn't change impact. The signal is still received. People don't consciously label this as insecurity. They simply feel something is off. They feel tension instead of trust. They feel noise instead of direction. And when that happens, respect quietly withdraws. Not in a dramatic way, but in subtle shifts, less attention, fewer follow-up questions, more interruptions. The message is clear even if it's never spoken. I don't feel settled following this energy. Respect doesn't respond to insecurity, it responds to clarity. Clarity is not about having all the answers, it's about being comfortable with what you do and don't know. It's the ability to say something simply and stand behind it without defensiveness. It's the discipline to pause before reacting, to choose your response rather than be pulled by emotion. Clarity feels grounded, and grounded energy is reassuring. The invisible signal you send is shaped most powerfully in moments of pressure. When challenged, do you rush to defend yourself or do you stay present? When interrupted, do you fight for space or do you reclaim it calmly? When something unexpected happens, do you react emotionally or intentionally? These moments reveal more than any prepared speech ever could. Most people believe respect is earned by asserting themselves. They push their opinions harder, speak more forcefully, and react quickly to show strength. But strength that needs to be proven rarely feels strong to others. True strength feels stable. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up as composure, especially when others lose theirs. Clarity sends a very specific signal. I'm not confused about who I am or what matters here. That signal relaxes people. It allows them to listen instead of brace. It creates space for influence. When someone speaks from clarity, their words don't compete with their energy. Everything aligns, and alignment is persuasive in a way force never is. Insecurity, on the other hand, creates mixed signals. The words may be confident, but the tone reveals urgency. The message may be strong, but the reaction to disagreement shows fragility. People sense these contradictions instantly, and when they do, they trust the signal more than the statement. They trust what they feel over what they're told. This is why two people can say the same thing and receive completely different responses. One is heard, the other is questioned, one earns respect, the other earns resistance. The difference is not intelligence or experience. It's the signal underneath the words. The calm certainty versus the restless need to be validated. Timing plays a huge role in this signal. Speaking too soon often reveals a need to be seen. Speaking too late can reveal hesitation. But speaking at the right moment, after listening, after understanding the room, signals awareness. Awareness tells people you're not just thinking about yourself, but about the shared outcome. And that shift alone builds respect. Reactions are perhaps the loudest signal of all. Anyone can appear composed when things go smoothly. But when something challenges your ego, your patience, or your control, the truth shows up. A sharp response signals threat. A measured response signals strength. People remember how you handle pressure far longer than what you say when everything is comfortable. The most powerful part of this is that once you become aware of the signal, you can change it instantly. Not by acting, but by grounding yourself, by slowing your breathing, by listening fully, by allowing silence to exist without rushing to fill it. These small internal adjustments completely alter how you're perceived externally. Stay with this idea because understanding the invisible signal changes the way you move through every interaction. You stop trying to manage impressions and start managing alignment. And when your tone, timing, and reactions all come from clarity, respect stops being something you chase. It becomes something others offer quietly, naturally, and without resistance. This skill isn't taught in school. From the very beginning, we are taught to raise our hands, speak up, compete, and perform. We are rewarded for being fast with answers, loud with opinions, and visible with effort. Grades are given for output, not presence. Achievement is measured by results, not by how we hold ourselves while pursuing them. So we grow up believing that if we just become more impressive, more confident, more dominant, respect will automatically follow. But no one ever pauses to teach us the quiet discipline that actually makes people listen. It's not rewarded on social media either. Social platforms celebrate extremes, loud voices get amplified, bold claims get shared. Certainty, even when it's shallow, travels faster than thoughtfulness. The algorithm doesn't reward restraint. It doesn't highlight pauses or nuance. It pushes those who react quickly, speak dramatically, and project unshakable confidence. In that environment, the subtle skill of grounded presence looks invisible. It doesn't trend, it doesn't go viral. And because it doesn't perform well in public metrics, many assume it doesn't matter. And at first glance, it doesn't look impressive. It looks slow, it looks quiet. It looks like doing less when everyone else is doing more. It looks like listening instead of speaking, pausing instead of reacting, holding back instead of pushing forward. In a culture obsessed with visibility, this can easily be mistaken for weakness or lack of ambition. So people overlook it. They chase what's obvious instead. That's why so many people chase confidence, authority, or dominance and still feel overlooked. They polish their delivery, they strengthen their voice, they assert their opinions more aggressively, they adopt the posture of leadership without developing the inner stability that gives leadership weight. From the outside, it looks like growth. But inside, it often creates exhaustion because sustaining dominance requires constant effort. You have to keep proving yourself, you have to keep winning, you have to stay loud to stay relevant. What no one tells you is that respect doesn't come from effort alone, it comes from coherence, from the alignment between who you are, how you feel, and how you act. That alignment can't be faked and it can't be rushed. It develops quietly over time through self-awareness and restraint. And because it's internal before it's external, it's hard to teach in traditional ways. Schools teach knowledge, systems teach skills, platforms teach performance. But this skill requires introspection. It requires noticing your impulses instead of obeying them. It requires choosing when not to speak. It requires being comfortable without applause. These are not things that fit neatly into curricula or metrics. They don't show immediate results. And because modern systems prioritize speed and output, anything that grows slowly gets dismissed. There's also an uncomfortable truth. Teaching this skill would require acknowledging that much of what we reward is superficial. It would mean admitting that louder doesn't mean better, faster doesn't mean smarter, and more visible doesn't mean more valuable. That's a hard message for institutions built on competition and comparison to embrace. So the lesson is skipped, not because it's unimportant, but because it challenges the structure itself. Those who eventually master this quieter skill often learn it the hard way, through being misunderstood, through being overlooked, through realizing that pushing harder isn't working. They reach a point where they stop asking, how do I get people to respect me? And start asking, how do I become someone whose presence naturally invites respect? That shift changes everything. They stop performing and start grounding. They stop reacting and start responding. They stop chasing validation and start cultivating clarity. And slowly, something changes in how people treat them. Conversations feel different. Interruptions decrease. Their words land with more weight, even when they say less. But not because they demanded respect, because they became steady enough to receive it. The people who truly earn respect are rarely the ones who talk the most about leadership or confidence. They don't advertise their authority. They don't dominate every exchange. They've mastered something quieter and far more powerful: self-regulation. The ability to remain centered regardless of what's happening around them. The discipline to choose their energy instead of letting circumstances choose it for them. That mastery creates a calm that others can feel. And calm is rare. In a world driven by urgency and noise, calm stands out. It signals depth. It signals maturity. It signals that you are not controlled by every external stimulus. And people trust that, they respect it, even if they can't explain why. This is why the skill isn't taught or celebrated widely. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It reveals itself only through consistency. But once you recognize it, you start seeing it in every respected leader, every trusted voice, every person whose presence seems to quiet the room without effort. And you realize that what looked invisible was actually the most powerful thing in the room all along. When you lack the skill, the consequences don't arrive loudly. They show up quietly over time in ways that are easy to misinterpret. People interrupt you mid-sentence, not out of rudeness, but because something in your presence doesn't signal authority. They question your decisions, not because they distrust your intelligence, but because they don't feel anchored by your certainty. They listen to your ideas, nod along, and even agree, but when it's time to act, they don't follow. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, frustration begins to build. At first, you assume it's a communication problem. Maybe you need to explain better. Maybe you need to be clearer, louder, more persuasive. So you work harder, you prepare more. You put in extra hours refining your message, sharpening your arguments, collecting evidence to support your ideas. You tell yourself that if people just understood how much effort you're putting in, they would respect you more. But instead of gaining traction, you feel resistance, and that resistance feels personal. Over time, a question starts forming in your mind, one you may not say out loud, but feel deeply. Why do I work harder than others, yet get less recognition? You look around and see people with less experience, less skill, sometimes even less commitment, being listened to more than you. Their ideas move faster. Their decisions stick. Their presence carries weight yours doesn't seem to have. And it's confusing because you know you're capable. The instinctive response is to push even harder, to overcompensate, to assert yourself more forcefully in meetings, to jump in quicker so you don't get overlooked, to defend your ideas before they're even challenged. But this only deepens the problem. The more you push, the more you signal uncertainty. The more you try to prove your value, the more you communicate that it's not yet established. And people feel that even if they can't explain it. The cost of ignoring this skill is not just professional stagnation, it's emotional exhaustion. It's the quiet erosion of confidence that comes from constantly feeling unseen. You begin to doubt yourself even though nothing about your capability has changed. You start questioning your instincts. You wonder if something is wrong with you, when in reality, something is simply missing. That missing skill is not about doing more. It's about regulating how you show up while you do what you already do. Without it, your effort becomes invisible noise. With it, even small actions carry influence. When it's missing, people focus on your words and dissect them. When it's present, people feel your intent and trust it. Being interrupted repeatedly does something subtle to the mind. It teaches you to rush, to speak faster before you lose the floor. That urgency then becomes part of your signal. And urgency rarely inspires confidence. It communicates pressure, not leadership. People respond to it by either tuning out or pushing back. Neither leads to respect. Being questioned constantly has a similar effect. You start over-explaining, anticipating objections, stacking justifications. Your ideas become heavy, burdened by the need to be defended. And in that process, the simplicity and clarity that made them strong in the first place gets lost. People don't reject the idea, they reject the energy behind it. Listening without following is perhaps the most painful cost of all. It creates the illusion of progress without the reality of impact. You feel heard, but nothing changes. And that disconnect slowly drains motivation. You begin to wonder if speaking up is even worth it. Some people withdraw at this point, others become bitter. Both responses are understandable, but neither solves the root problem. The answer is an effort. Effort is already there. It's not intelligence. Your track record proves that. The answer lies in the absence of a skill that shapes how others experience you, not what you produce. It's the skill of presence, of composure, of responding instead of reacting. Without it, your work has to fight for attention. With it, attention comes to your work. Ignoring this skill doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. You start tying your worth to outcomes you can't fully control: recognition, approval, acknowledgement. And when those don't come, self-doubt creeps in. Reclaiming this skill restores something deeper than respect. It restores self-trust. Once you understand the cost, you realize how expensive it's been to ignore it, not in money, but in energy, confidence, and missed influence. And the moment you become aware of it, you regain choice. You can stop trying to earn respect through effort alone and start cultivating the inner stability that allows respect to form naturally. That shift doesn't just change how others respond to you. It changes how you experience your own work, your voice, and your value. True respect can't be forced. The moment you try to demand it, you lose it. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, especially in a world that constantly teaches us to assert, to push, to claim our space. We are told to speak up, stand our ground, make ourselves heard. And while those ideas have value, they often get misunderstood. When respect becomes something you try to extract from others, it slips through your fingers. Not because people are resistant, but because respect doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to invitation. Demanding respect usually comes from frustration, from feeling overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. It shows up as raised voices, sharper words, rigid postures, or an insistence on authority. Sometimes it's subtle, masked as professionalism or firmness. But underneath, there's often a message being sent: acknowledge me, validate me, take me seriously. And the moment that message is felt, respect begins to retreat. Because respect given under pressure never lasts. It may look like compliance, but it isn't trust. Respect is invited through consistency. When your actions match your words over time, people relax around you. They don't have to guess who you are or how you'll respond. Predictability and values create safety. And safety is the foundation of respect. People don't respect perfection. They respect reliability. They respect knowing that you won't shift your principles depending on the audience or the moment. Consistency also shows up in emotional regulation. When you react differently every time, calm one day, explosive the next, people become cautious. They may listen, but they won't fully engage. When your emotional tone stays steady, even under pressure, people learn they can trust the environment you create. That trust slowly transforms into respect. Respect is also invited through intention. Intention shapes how people experience your presence. Are you entering conversations to win or to understand, to dominate or to contribute, to protect your ego or to move something forward? People feel your intention before they hear your argument. Even strong ideas lose credibility when they're driven by ego. Even simple statements gain power when they're driven by purpose. When your intention is clear, you don't need to assert yourself aggressively. You don't need to control every outcome. You can allow conversations to unfold without fear of losing relevance. That ease communicates confidence far more effectively than force ever could. It tells people you're secure enough to listen, secure enough to wait, secure enough to let others speak. Restraint is perhaps the most misunderstood part of inviting respect. Many mistake restraint for passivity. They assume that holding back means giving up power. In reality, Restraint is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. It's the ability to pause when reacting would be easier, to choose silence when speaking would be self-serving, to let others finish instead of interrupting to prove a point. Restraint creates space. And in that space, respect grows. When you don't rush to fill every moment, people lean in. When you don't over-explain, your words carry more weight. When you don't defend yourself at every perceived slight, you signal confidence in your own value. That signal is powerful because it's rare. Once you understand how respect is invited, not demanded, every conversation begins to change. At work, you stop fighting for attention and start earning trust. You listen more deeply, speak more deliberately, and respond rather than react. People begin to seek your input instead of challenging it. Not because you've become more authoritative, but because you've become more grounded. At home, the shift is just as profound. Conversations become less about winning and more about connection. You don't need to assert your position to feel respected. You create an environment where respect flows naturally because your presence feels safe, intentional, and steady. Authority in relationships doesn't come from control, it comes from emotional leadership. In life overall, this understanding changes how you move through the world. You stop measuring yourself by how others respond in the moment. You stop needing instant validation. You trust that respect builds through how consistently you show up, not how forcefully you assert yourself. That trust frees you from the exhausting cycle of proving your worth. Inviting respect requires patience because it grows quietly. It doesn't announce itself, it shows up in subtle shifts. People listening more closely, questioning you less defensively, valuing your perspective even when they disagree. And those shifts are far more powerful than any demand could ever be. Because respect that is invited stays, it deepens. And once it's established, it transforms every interaction you have permanently. The subtle skill that earns instant respect is the ability to respond instead of react. It sounds simple, almost too simple to matter. Yet it is one of the rarest abilities in human interaction. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence or good intentions. They fail because they surrender control in the very moments that matter most. A reaction is automatic. It's fast, emotional, and driven by impulse. A response, on the other hand, is chosen. It requires awareness, restraint, and clarity. And that small gap between what happens and how you answer it is where respect is either built or lost. When something unexpected occurs, a challenge, a disagreement, a criticism, your nervous system reacts before your mind has time to think. The body tightens. The heart rate changes. Words rush forward. In that moment, reacting feels justified. It feels honest. It feels like self-protection. But what feels right internally often looks unstable externally. People may not remember exactly what you said, but they will remember the energy behind it. And reactive energy rarely inspires confidence. Responding intentionally doesn't mean suppressing emotion or pretending not to feel. It means recognizing the emotion without allowing it to take control. It means acknowledging the internal reaction and still choosing how you want to show up. This is difficult because it requires self-awareness in real time. It requires noticing the urge to interrupt, to defend, to escalate, and deciding not to follow it. Most people react because it's easier. Reactions demand no effort. They are reflexes. But reflexes are shaped by fear, ego, and habit. When you react, you hand control of the situation to whatever triggered you. The tone of the conversation, the direction of the exchange, and often your credibility are all determined by something outside you. And that lack of control is felt immediately by others. Responding, however, sends a different signal. It says, I'm not threatened by this moment. It says, I have enough clarity to choose my words. That signal creates calm, and calm is persuasive. When someone remains composed while others become emotional, the room naturally gravitates toward them, not because they are louder, but because they are steadier. This is why most people fail here without ever knowing why. They believe respect is lost in big moments, major mistakes, wrong decisions, missed opportunities. In reality, it's lost in micro moments. In the eye roll, in the sharp reply, in the rushed explanation, in the defensive tone, each reaction chips away at the sense of stability others feel around you. And once that stability is gone, respect struggles to survive. The ability to respond instead of react changes how conflict unfolds. Instead of escalating tension, you de-escalate it. Instead of proving a point, you create understanding. This doesn't make you passive, make strategic. You still express boundaries. You still speak truth, but you do so from a place of control rather than compulsion. Intentional responses are slower. They allow silence. They are comfortable with pauses. And pauses can feel uncomfortable to those who rely on speed to maintain control. But pauses signal thoughtfulness. They show that you're not operating on impulse, that you're considering impact, not just expression, and that consideration is deeply respected. Emotion-driven reactions often feel justified in the moment, but costly in the long run. They can win arguments and lose relationships. They can feel powerful and still erode trust. An intentional response may not feel as satisfying immediately, but it builds something far more valuable: credibility. Over time, people learn that when you speak, it's deliberate. When you respond, it's considered. That reputation gives your words weight before you even say them. This skill also changes your relationship with yourself. When you stop reacting, you stop being pulled in every direction by external triggers. You regain a sense of agency. You realize that you don't need to respond to everything instantly, that not every comment deserves a reply. That not every challenge requires a defense. That realization is freeing. It reduces stress. It sharpens focus. It strengthens self-trust. Most people never develop this skill because it requires slowing down in a world that rewards speed. It requires humility because you must admit that your first impulse isn't always your best one. It requires discipline because you must practice restraint repeatedly. But once you develop it, it becomes unmistakable. People notice. They may not name it, but they feel it. The ability to respond instead of react doesn't just earn respect in dramatic situations. It earns respect in everyday interactions. In conversations that go slightly off course. In disagreements that could turn personal. In moments where ego wants to take the lead. Each time you choose intention over impulse, you strengthen the signal you send. And over time, that signal becomes your reputation. Respect follows those who are not controlled by every stimulus. It follows those who can stay present under pressure. It follows those who respond with clarity instead of reacting with emotion. And that is why this subtle skill, practiced quietly and consistently, changes how you are seen in ways no amount of talent or effort ever could. Because this isn't just about being respected. Respect on its own is shallow if it isn't connected to trust. People can admire you from a distance and still never follow you. They can acknowledge your intelligence and still not rely on you. What truly changes your life is not being noticed, but being trusted. And trust is what turns presence into influence, ideas into action, and conversations into impact. That is why watching this to the end matters more than you might think. Trust is built when people feel safe around you. Safe to disagree. Safe to speak honestly. Safe to slow down instead of rushing to defend themselves. Most people move through life creating tension without realizing it. They speak quickly, react emotionally, and push for outcomes before understanding the moment. This creates pressure, and pressure makes people withdraw. When you learn this skill fully, you stop creating pressure and start creating stability. That alone changes how people respond to you. By the end of this speech, you won't just understand the skill intellectually. You'll recognize it in real time. You'll start noticing the moments where you normally react without thinking. You'll become aware of the urge to interrupt, to explain, to defend, to control. Awareness is the first step to mastery. Once you see the pattern, you gain the ability to interrupt it. And that ability is what separates reactive people from respected ones. Knowing how to practice the skill daily is what makes it powerful. It's not about dramatic moments or big speeches. It's practiced in ordinary interactions. In how you answer a difficult question, in how you handle disagreement, in how you respond when someone misunderstands you. Each small choice becomes a repetition, and repetition turns behavior into identity. As you practice, you'll notice changes in leadership first. Leadership is not a title, it's a presence. People don't follow those who know the most. They follow those who feel the most reliable under pressure. When you respond instead of react, you become predictable in the best way. People know what to expect from you emotionally. That consistency builds trust faster than any authority ever could. Relationships change as well. Conversations become less about winning and more about understanding. You stop needing to prove your point to feel valued. You begin listening not as a strategy, but as a habit. That shift makes others feel seen. And when people feel seen, they offer respect freely. Conflict doesn't disappear, but it becomes constructive instead of destructive. Self-control is perhaps the most overlooked benefit. When you master this skill, you stop being pulled by every external trigger. You regain control over your energy. You decide where to invest your attention and where to withdraw it. That control creates calm. And calm is clarity in motion. It allows you to think more clearly, choose more wisely, and act more intentionally. Mastering this skill quietly puts you ahead of most people because most people never slow down long enough to develop it. They are busy reacting, proving, defending, and performing. They confuse motion with progress and noise with influence. While they exhaust themselves chasing validation, you build something far more durable: credibility. Being remembered is not about being the loudest voice. It's about being the most grounded presence. People remember how you made them feel when things were uncertain. They remember who stayed calm, who listened, who didn't escalate. Those memories shape reputations, and reputations open doors long after conversations end. This is why watching to the end matters, not because of information, but because of transformation. Understanding the skill is only the beginning. Practicing it changes how you move through the world. It changes how others respond to you. And most importantly, it changes how you relate to yourself. You stop outsourcing your sense of worth to reactions you can't control. You anchor it in intentional action. When you understand this fully, respect stops being something you chase. Trust stops being something you hope for. Influence stops being something you force. They become natural outcomes of who you are and how you show up. And that shift doesn't just improve conversations, it reshapes leadership, deepens relationships, and strengthens self-mastery in ways that last. That is why this matters. Not for applause, not for attention, but for becoming someone others trust, follow, and remember quietly, consistently.